Good evening and welcome to Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat, your place for a fun conversation about horror movies. I am your host, Steve the Cat. It is Monday, it is October 14th, it is 2024, it is 10 p.m. here on the East Coast. On behalf of the entire cast and crew here at Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat, welcome to the show. We are coming to you live through the power of the internet. We are live on Facebook. We are live on YouTube. We are live on Twitch. We are live on X. We will be uploading the recording of this episode to Rumble. I cannot stream live to Rumble yet. Sorry, folks. But we are coming to you live through all these other platforms through the power of the internet around the world. Now, just a couple of words about the show Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat. Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat is not a live show. Most of the programming on the PBDC Collective is live broadcasts. However, Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat is pre-recorded because it's animated, and we don't have the budget to do live real-time animation here at Spooky Tales. So it is pre-recorded, but we do these live watch parties with you so you can interact with us in real time, live in the comments. So sit back, enjoy the episode. Feel free to comment with your friends. I'll be joining on the YouTube broadcast as soon as I get the episode going, and I will see you guys there. But before we get going, a big shout out and thank you to everyone at the PBDC Collective Incorporated. Your heartbeat of horror, whether you're interested in spooky tales, true crime, weird history, creepy stories, unexplained events, or interviews with your favorite haunt actors, we have some content for you here at PBDC Collective. So feel free to find us online. We are all over the place. You can find us at psychobunnydc.com. You can find us on YouTube. You can find us on Facebook. You can find us on Rumble, X, and Twitch. You can find us on Instagram and Discord. And you can also find us on Patreon. Patreon offers you a low cost for a subscription that gives you behind-the-scenes access to several broadcasts. So feel free to check that out, please. 2 weeks ago, we talked about a movie called The Third Saturday in October. It was not good, but we talked about it anyway. We did a broadcast about it. It was a movie that is not an old movie, but it was designed to look like an old movie to elicit some 70s horror nostalgia. We're doing something a little different tonight. We're doing an 80s creature feature called The Brain. So this is not a film that is designed to look like an old film. This actually is an old film from the 1980s. I watched this film originally a little over a year ago, thought it would be good to put on the schedule. And when I finally put it on the schedule for this season and got around to watching it and taking notes, was not as good as I remembered. So I was a little underwhelmed by this, but we have an episode on it. We'll talk about what's good and what's bad. It's not a bad movie. You will recognize some familiar faces in it, most notably David Gale from Reanimator. But with that, we are going to press the magic button and get the episode started. So here we go, everybody. Good evening and welcome to Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat, your place for a fun conversation about horror movies. Tonight we go back to the golden age of the 1980s with a campy 80s creature feature. We'll talk about that film, plus we'll talk about a recent slasher film franchise and other stuff I watched this week. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We're glad to have you here. Now pour yourself a drink and sit back because here we go.
seen you on TV.
Ah. I want you to clear your mind, Jim. And I want you to answer my questions to the best of your ability.
Hey, why'd you get it out again, huh?
Hey, relax, buddy. He didn't do anything.
This is none of your business.
What is Vivian holding in her hand, Jim?
An apple.
Your mediocre mind cannot begin to comprehend the importance of my work. I suggest you look into your own neurotic behavior, then perhaps you will understand your continuing negativity.
You have to stop this insane research. That thing isn't satisfied just controlling the minds of the people who watch your TV show.
That's food for thought.
Okay, let's get into our featured film review. Tonight we're talking about a film called The Brain. The Brain is a horror creature feature that was released in the year 1988. It was directed by Edward Hunt, and the cast includes Tom Bresnahan, Cynthia Preston, and David Gale, who you may recognize from Reanimator. So let's get into a conversation about The Brain. If you sit down to watch The Brain, what you should expect is a campy creature feature from the tail end of the 1980s that unfortunately does not quite live up to its potential, at least in my opinion. If you like the 1988 remake of The Blob, you might like The Brain. If you like the 1982 remake of The Thing, you might like The Brain. Those are two of my all-time favorite films. The Brain is not nearly as good as either of those two in my opinion, but that's kind of a faint criticism considering that The Blob and The Thing are two of my all-time favorites. Anyway, if you like The Blob or The Thing, you probably like The Brain. Let's get into setting your sights. This is the scale we like to use. On the far left side of the scale, we have very campy films such as Jason X. On the far right side of the scale, we have very serious films such as The Silence of the Lambs. As always, this scale is not intended to tell you the quality of the film, but it's intended to indicate what your mindset needs to be going into the film if you're going to enjoy it fully. If you're going to watch The Brain, set your sights all the way to the left. It is a very campy film. You need to go into it expecting a very campy film. Now, before we go any farther, we need to do our vocabulary lesson. This, of course, is the part of the show where we discuss new and innovative words and phrases in an effort to stay ahead of social media bots and algorithms that would otherwise try to ban our conversation. Social media bots and algorithms are always getting smarter, so the language must always evolve to stay ahead of them. 2 terms this week. Review terms, we've done these before, maybe not recently. Our first term is accent clonking. Accent clonking is the action of striking a character in the head with an axe or hatchet. Axe clonk. Now, there is a seasonal variation of this that used at Christmas time called firewood splitting. We don't really have any other colloquial forms of accent clonking. Our other term for the week is tree felling. Tree felling, of course, is in a horror movie the act of one character killing another character using a chainsaw. Colloquial forms of this include lumberjacking and releasing the woodsman. So if you hear it said that someone released the woodsman, they usually went to town on them with a chainsaw in the film. Anyway, these are your vocabulary terms. Please keep these terms in mind. They will become important later in the film. Now let's get into a film summary. In this film, Dr. Anthony Blake is a psychologist who, among other things, runs the Psychology Research Center. Ooh, very important man. In addition to that, he also hosts a popular TV show called Independent Thinking. Of course, Independent Thinking is an ironically titled show because what fans of Independent Thinking do not realize is that Dr. Blake is an alien. Or they also don't realize that there's a giant alien brain using the TV broadcast to control the minds of the audience. Only gifted troublemaker Jim stands between the brain and world domination. That, of course, brings us to our villain profile. Our villain for this week is the Brain. There you see the Brain in his giant jar. He is of the class of giant alien brain. His special powers include immense size and power, telepathy, hypnotism, and a strange ability to seemingly appear anywhere in the television studio at will. We never are worried with things like, how does he open doors? Or how did he get from one side of the studio to the other? He just kind of appears. Now, he does not have signature weapons, but he does have a signature technique. The Brain eats his prey whole. So let's talk about some of the things I liked about this film right off the bat. The film is a heaping helping of 1980s nostalgia, from the music to the hair to the sets. Everything is straight out of the 1980s in this film. It was released in 1988, so it's genuine. It's not nostalgia for nostalgia's sake. It is a legitimate 80s film. The film does not take itself seriously, so don't take this one too seriously if you sit down to watch it. David Gale plays an excellent villain. Yes, you may know him from Reanimator. He's a villain in this film as well. David Gale plays an excellent villain playing Dr. Blake. The sight of the giant brain eating characters whole is hilarious. Honestly, though, that's about it. Unfortunately, this film fell kind of flat for me, so I didn't have a full list of things I liked to go through with you. So that brings us to things that could have been better. Now, unfortunately, there are a number of things that could have been better about this film. Starting with the fact that the film does not take itself seriously. If that is a problem for you, do not sit down and watch this film. It is not intended to be taken seriously. If you need to take the film seriously, watch something else. This is not the film for you. For a campy creature feature, it could use a bit more campy humor. It just seems to not have enough going for it. Also, a great deal of the film is Jim and his girlfriend being chased by various bad guys throughout various settings of the film. So much of the movie is just Jim and his girlfriend being chased. You know, chased through the school, chased through the studio, chased down the road. It just goes on and on. It's not always the same person chasing them, but you get the idea. The acting is, of course, terrible. It's a 1980s creature feature campy film. What would you expect? It's terrible acting. The film never really provides a motive for the villain. You don't find out until the end even that he's an alien. You kind of have to assume that there's Dr. Blake and he has this giant brain and he's using it to control people through a TV show, and we never really understand why or what he's after. And finally, at least to me, the film telegraphs how it is going to end pretty early on. Pretty early on, if you're paying attention, you can figure out how this film is going to end, which, again, it's a campy creature feature from the 1980s. It's not intended to be art. But it seems a little easier than should be to figure out what's going to happen at the end of the film. Let's get into Steve's scorecard for this film. Kills, I counted 8. Bare breasts, I counted 4, same actress, once at the beginning of the film, once near the end of the film. Denoggening, how many characters lose their heads in this film? I counted 2, including 1 via axe. Car chases, I counted 2. That includes 1 solo vehicle gone wild. So 1 car chase, 1 solo vehicle gone wild. But from a perspective of setting up the special effects budget, 2 car chases. Flung out the window, I counted 1. Axe and clonking, our vocabulary term from tonight, I counted 1. Tree felling, our other vocabulary term from this evening, I counted 1. So there's 1 instance of releasing the woodsman in this film. And finally, giant exploding brains, I counted 1. Of course, that's not all. With your viewing of this film, you get a number of bonus features, such as a cheesy 1980s theme music from beginning to end. You get bleeding teddy bear action. You get sodium in the toilet action. You get that creepy guy from Reanimator, yes, David Gale, playing the villain in this film as well. He wouldn't be on TV if he wasn't good. Yes, the parents in this film dispense lots of homespun wisdom, among it chestnuts such as, he wouldn't be on TV if he wasn't good. So rest assured that the parents are authority figures who really know what they're talking about in this film. You get recurring creepy tentacle action. You get evil orderly action, and not only that, wait, why did the evil orderly have an axe with him? That will make sense later on in the film. You get the world's dirtiest sweater. And finally, you get behold the hypnotic power of my boobs. Yes, that goes with the breast count from earlier in the film. So let's get to Steve's final score for this film. We're going to give it 2 paws out of 4. Kind of disappointing. We're going to say this is a campy creature feature from the 1980s that falls a bit flat without enough campy humor to be a real classic, and spending far too much time with characters getting chased by bad guys. It's not a bad film, it's just, it seems like it could have been better than it ended up. So that's The Brain, and that is our featured film review for the evening. Thank you very much. And now a word from our benevolent overlords at PBDC TV, your nightly heartbeat of horror.
Blazing skies, the world in flames, nuclear fire, unforgiving claims. I survived through the dust and ash, came back in time to give you a chance.
We've reached the end of another episode of Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat, but before we go, as is our tradition, we're going to take just a moment to discuss some of the other stuff Steve watched this week. Now, if you were here for our last episode, we talked about some of the methods we use to choose films for featured film reviews. In all the forest of horror movies that are available out there, how do you pick out movies that are worth doing a review on? Well, there's multiple strategies, one strategy being to look for films with sequels. So we're going to continue with that logic this week, and we're going to try a film called Jack and Jill. Now, this is not the Adam Sandler film Jack and Jill. This is The Legend of Jack and Jill. This is a 2021 British horror film that I found on Amazon Prime. In this film, young siblings Jack and Jill escape with their mental patient mother from a mental institution and climb high atop a forested hill to avoid their pursuers. Jack and Jill's mother dies during the escape, leaving the young siblings to survive on their own in the woods. And years later, a group of young people visit the site to go hiking and fall prey to the now murderous Jack and Jill. Why are Jack and Jill murderous? Well, you kind of have to watch the movie. Anyway, Jack and Jill is a horror franchise with multiple sequels. So I decided to give it a try under the theory that a film worthy of sequels might be entertaining. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago, that sometimes you can find a movie worth watching by looking for movies with sequels. In this case, however, it was a mistake. On the pro side, this is a pretty conventional slasher film with a respectable kill count. On the con side, the kills are uninteresting due to a small practical special effects budget. It's just not that interesting a movie. The kills aren't that interesting, the acting's not good, the production values aren't good. It's just not a good film. So the verdict here is you should not spend any time on this film. It's derivative and largely uninteresting, and frankly, it's not that well executed. It does, however, have sequels. Which brings us to Jack and Jill Part 3. Yes, Jack and Jill Part 3, not Part 2. This is a 2023 British horror film that was available again on Amazon Prime. Why did I watch Jack and Jill Part 3? Well, in for a penny, in for a pound. I decided to watch the entire franchise once I watched the first one, just to see if they got worse or if by some chance they got better. Now, sadly, Part 2 was not available on Amazon Prime when I watched, and I'm going to confess that I did not look that hard for it. But I did find Part 3, so I watched Part 3. This film starts with a recap, so I was able to transition from Part 1 to Part 3 with no confusion. In this film, the cast of a live streaming reality show visit the site of the... Let's start again. The cast of a live streaming reality show visit the site of the notorious Jack and Jill murders from a decade before. It's your typical, it's kind of a ripoff of Halloween Resurrection. People wearing cameras, investigating the area where the murders took place in kind of a true crime competition. The winner's going to come away with some prize money. Obviously, there's going to be some scares built in by the film crew. Your typical ripoff of Halloween Resurrection. Soon the members of the cast and crew, however, began to fall victim to the still very real Jack and Jill. On the pro side, this is a reasonably interesting setup for a slasher film, and it does once again have a respectable kill count. This setup has been done before, most commonly associated with, like I said, Halloween Resurrection, but there have been others. But it does give you an excuse to have a lot of people creeping around in the woods carrying cameras. On the con side, the lack of a practical special effects budget makes the film uninteresting. And once again, the acting's not that good, the production values aren't that good, it's just not that great a film. The verdict here is if you liked the first one, you'll like this one. Odds are that you won't like either of them. Now, Part 3 is arguably slightly better than Part 1. I'll leave that to your own independent judgment. For me, they were about the same. Not really worth your time, but they are conventional slasher movies, so if you're looking for just a conventional slasher film and aren't too concerned about a practical special effects budget, if you're just looking for kill count, these films do have kill count to them. So they're worth watching in that case, but that's really all they've got going for them. So that is other stuff Steve watched this week. That is Jack and Jill and Jack and Jill Part 3. That wraps up another episode of Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat. Thank you so much for joining us. We're glad you were able to drop by. Now, if you did enjoy the show, then please check us out on social media. You can find Steve the Cat on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, or X, or whatever they're calling Twitter these days. So please stop by and hit that subscribe button. Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat is available exclusively through the PBDC Collective Incorporated, now legally incorporated and still your heartbeat of horror. You can find us on the web at psychobunnydc.com, or you can check us out on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, Instagram, Twitter, Rumble, and Patreon. That wraps the show for this week. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll be back again in 2 weeks with another all-new episode for you to enjoy. But for now, thank you for watching and have a great week. Good night, everybody. Well, that wraps up the show for this week. Thank you so much for joining us. I see from the comments, most of the people seem to have joined live from the Facebook stream. Good to see all of you. I was watching from the YouTube stream, so I wasn't able to interact with those of you on Facebook. Glad to see that we were streaming on Facebook, though. 2 weeks ago, StreamYard could not initiate a stream on Facebook, and I was concerned that was going to be a permanent problem, but apparently it has resolved itself. So thank you to all the IT people in the world. That is all we have for this week. Next week, we will be talking about a film called Clown. Excuse me, 2 weeks from now, not next week, next episode, 2 weeks from now, we will be talking an episode called Clown, which is a movie that it was produced by Eli Roth and is a little bit disturbing. But it's pretty good. If you can get past the disturbing aspects of it, it is pretty good. So with that, we're going to sign off for this episode of Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat. Once again, thank you so much for joining us. We're glad to have you here. Oh, this is a good one I see in the comments from Susan. Yes. Okay. With that, we're going to wrap up. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody. We'll see you again soon. Good night, all.